Welcome to another episode of the SCHA-MI podcast. My name is Alex Frankfort, Communications Manager at SCHA-MI, and today we're happy to be joined by Michigan State Representative Abdullah Hammoud, who is a longtime supporter and advocate of the School-Based Health Center Network. In fact, back in February, it was Representative Hammoud who petitioned the Michigan House of Representatives to officially recognize February as School-Based Healthcare Awareness Month. So Representative, thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate all the support over the years.
No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the organization for all the wonderful work you guys do over the years.
Absolutely. So I want to start our conversation off by asking, what are some of your favorite experiences working with the healthcare network, with the health center network across the state over the years?
I think it's gaining a true understanding for just the impact of the work you do on the ground. Obviously in Dearborn, we have a very unique population, a population that is largely minority, home to many immigrants and many refugees. And the idea of the way that we can reach these children, reach these youth, work with the families to provide them the support services that they need is extremely impactful. And so whatever we can do in Lansing in return to support those efforts, we're bought in because we see the true impact. It's not very often that we see the impact of the appropriations that we make in a budget cycle, for example. But we very much and very clearly see here for every dollar we invest, the return we see in the improvement of quality of life for Michigan residents and Michigan families.
Yeah. And what do you see as that impact? What is that value for the students, for their parents, for their local communities that are surrounding those centers?
Yeah, it's more than just for the students and families, and I'll get back to them, but it's also to the educators. It's also to the professional personnel throughout our schools, and it's because we're taking a burden that should never have been on their plate to begin with, and now we're providing professional support and assistance to try to tackle some of these underlying issues. We're helping parents with the idea that relief is available and that they need everything all the time for the children. The help is near, the help is there. And so, to that extent, I think the impact we see not only immediately in terms of youth having outlets, having the support they need, but also I think we're going to see it generationally in terms of the longevity, in terms of just the outlook and perspective that an individual might have on life, having come across one of your health centers and received the support that they need. And so I think you're going to see an economic output difference. I think you're going to see a health output difference, and it's going to be multifaceted across the board.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. So, given the unique circumstances of the last, year and a half now with the pandemic, what do you believe, or what have you seen as far as the unique role that centers have been able to play or should play, in their communities and providing that extra little bit of help, during these tough and unusual times for everyone?
Yeah, the first and foremost, as we talk to the pandemic, our major concern is obviously trying to avoid the spread of COVID. But the secondary concern that's kind of there is that we have an underlying mental illness surge that's happening across the board, especially for those children that are not getting that face-to-face time back in their schools. They're now, switching over to Zoom. They're a little more isolated. We know anxiety, depression, several other factors are kind of, on the increase. And so the health centers can play a very extremely critical role in ensuring that children and their families have the resources they need at home to cope with the pandemic, the impacts of the pandemic. I imagine that many of these families also know a loved one or a friend who is either hospitalized or may have lost their life to COVID. And so we can have coping mechanisms in place and the right support services in place. And so, in a strange way, the silver lining in this pandemic is having these health centers available and making sure that we fund them so that we can have them in the community in every single school across the whole so everybody has the opportunity to help that they need, whether they know they need this or, still trying to discover that they need assistance in some regard.
Certainly. And so, as you said, and it sounds like it's a concern and it's a point of emphasis for you and your colleagues, in the legislature. What does that look like as far as your efforts to help folks address that in their communities from a legislative, priority perspective?
Yeah. I can tell you we've had many conversations with the chair of the Health and Human Services budget, who's been largely supportive of these efforts as well, and trying to appropriate the right funding to get a school-based health center or health clinic in every single school across the whole state. That is a goal of mine that I hope to leave the legislature knowing has been accomplished, and it's something that we're fighting for every single day. And I'm hopeful that possibly with some of the pandemic relief dollars that have come to the state through the federal government, and the ones that have yet to come, that we're able to accomplish this. Every school district also receives some resources, so we're advocating locally as well to see if an appropriate, if a portion of those resources allocated to individual school districts can also be used in these endeavors. I think we understand. And everybody experienced the pandemic differently, but the pandemic impacted and changed our lives, for generations. The way we interact, the way we learn, the way we educate. And I think with that, there's going to be a transition, a very difficult transition for a lot of youth who might not have been ready. I wasn't ready. We're doing this over Zoom. I can't tell you how many Zoom meetings I have. And there's a consequence to it, of course. And so, whatever we can from a legislative perspective, from an appropriation perspective, to give the resources to organizations such as yours, that we know are impactful, that make a real difference in these young people's lives and the youth's lives. That's what we're fighting for, and I'm hopeful that we can get it done.
Absolutely. So moving forward in 2021, what do you believe that health centers in the networks, what do you think their goals should be moving forward into the next school year and into the next, annual year?
I would love to see first an assessment of what is the true need now in the pandemic, in the current pandemic era, and in the assumed need in the post-pandemic era. We know there was always a need before, but as I spoke to earlier, I think with the pandemic, we're just going to see the surge of mental illness, the surge of depression, anxiety. Are children going to be prepared to interact with their classmates again in the same manner, in the same demeanor? Is there always going to be this underlying fear of, if there's an outbreak, what does that mean? How does that impact the mindset of these children? And so I'd love to see an assessment to be conducted in order for us to gain a better understanding of what is it that we need to address in addition to what we already know. And then second, just greater advocacy. Honestly, I've really appreciated the relationship that we built. You guys have a great government relations advocacy team, and it's been a privilege to work alongside them. And I'm hopeful that as you connect with new legislators, because we know term limits, that you build those relationships, because everybody cares about the children in their school district. You guys have a winning issue. I hate to frame it like this, but you have a winning issue because everybody cares about the children and the families back home. And so that's why I'm hopeful that we can provide the resources to the organization in order to accomplish this feat of getting a health clinic in every single community across the whole state.
Yeah, absolutely. So that winning issue, like you said, what can community members and our healthcare network staff, what can they do to help support you and other legislators who are sympathetic to the cause and want to help us? How can we help support your efforts?
I think it's the sharing of personal narratives of those who've been touched and impacted by the services offered. I think that's extremely powerful. I think it's reaching out to your fellow legislator if you have not already done so, and not just once via email, but pick up the phone and call, schedule a Zoom meeting with both your state representative and your state senator to speak to the importance that this has. I think it's utilizing the networks that you have, reaching out to the local school districts and the Association of School Boards, and partnering up in this advocacy work, because it's impactful to them too. And if the local school districts can draw down dollars from the state, I think they'd all be on board, because we just know how tight funding is for school infrastructure and such. So I think it's doing what you have already done, what you've been doing, and just building up on that.
Terrific. So that was the last question I had for you, Representative. Is there any other points you want to make before we leave you?
Honestly, it's just a sincere thank you for all the work you and the association and the healthcare professionals across the board have been doing over the years, and the true impact that you guys have made in the lives of children and families across the state. I can't thank you enough for it. It's been a privilege to work alongside you, and hopefully we got a few more years of work left. And again, I have my eyes on the prize of what we want to accomplish, and God willing, we'll get it done.
Thank you, Representative. You are one of our strongest and loudest, supporters in the legislature. So we can't thank you enough for all that you do.